fear. It is a process that is completely unconscious and involves two paths, a high road and a low road. The low road is a quick response and can be careless. Shoot first, think later. For example, you're camping outside when you hear something brushing up against your tent. It could be a small bush or it could be a bear. The low road takes no chances. The sound and shadow that you assume is a bear act as the stimulus. The instant you hear the sound or see the shadow, the information is immediately sent to your hypothalamus and initiates the fight or flight response. While the low road is already loaded and ready to fire, the high road is simultaneously assessing the situation. Have I heard this noise? Have I seen this shadow? Is this a bush or is this a bear? The high road is slower and thus takes more time, which is why it takes a short second or two from being scared and immediately alert to realizing that there is no threat and that you can calm down. Fear is a survival instinct that all humans and animals possess. It is an emotional response induced by a perceived threat, which instantly causes a change in brain and organ function. Fear can lead us to hide, to run away, or to freeze on the spot. On the other hand, it can also cause us to confront and even attack the threat. All of this is called the fight or flight response. During this fight or flight response, our heart rate goes up as adrenaline gets pumped through our body, causing our body to be faster, more tense, and generally very alert. Many people are afraid of, for example, snakes, rats, or sharks. But think about it, why are you afraid of them? Do they really pose a threat? Is it a rational one, or is it the effect of fear conditioning? In the 1920s, American psychologist John Watson tested this theory with white rats. Little Albert, an 11-month-old child, not only had no fear of rats, but he actually showed joy at the sight of the rodents and would often reach out for them. This was short-lived. Watson used classical conditioning, pairing a neutral stimulus, the rat, with a negative effect. Whenever Albert reached for one of the rats, a terrifyingly loud noise was made directly behind the small child. Not only did Albert very quickly learn to fear the white rats, crying and moving away whenever he saw one, but he also started to cry in the presence of other furry animals, even fearing a Santa Claus mask with a white beard. This is a great example of how we can learn to fear something. If you can watch a horror movie without folding into a ball and crying in a corner, you know that fear can be fun. The fight or flight response is one that can be quite exciting and can go as far as mimicking sexual arousal. Psychologist Arthur Aaron did a study that proves just this. He split a group of men into two. Half walked across an unstable bridge at a height of over 200 feet. The other group walked over a completely stable bridge just 10 feet above the water. As part of this study, a beautiful female assistant was placed at the end of the bridge to ask some questions. She then gave each man her phone number in case they had any questions. Of the 33 men that walked across a stable bridge, only 2 called her back. Of the 33 that walked across the unstable, scary bridge, 9 called her back. Because fear encourages sexual attraction, it makes sense that a horror movie is often a great first date. Although our fears can indeed be very rational, even being a good thing, our fears can often be completely irrational. A study has found that a person's fear can make a threat look worse than it really is. Although this isn't always so, it occurs more predominantly in people who have very specific fears, like spiders for example. Those who fear these creepy crawlers are less likely to correctly guess the creature's size and can often perceive it to be bigger than it actually is. This very same visual miscalculation has been found to happen within those who are afraid of heights. When standing over a 10-meter high diving board, they will often overestimate the true distance to the ground when looking over the edge. This is the result of overestimating the vertical distance to the ground. Again, this is also true for those who fear small spaces, as they tend to underestimate the horizontal distance in a given space. While we all have our own unique fears, they may actually have less to do with you personally than you think. A study done on lab mice may just prove this to be true. Mice were trained to associate the scent of cherry blossoms with an electrical shock. Through fear conditioning, they grew to fear the scent. When these mice later had pups and even grandpups, they were all wary of the aroma of cherry blossoms as well. This, even though they had never received any shocks themselves. Their cautions might have had something to do with epigenetics. This mechanism modifies the genetic code, turning certain genes off and activating others depending on the environment or experience of the individual. The two generations following the flower-fearing parents all had brains that were literally different. They were now born with large areas that were dedicated solely to recognizing that specific odor as a threat. Perhaps to help them avoid that electrical shock that their furry mice ancestors had to go through. Fear is extremely important. If we didn't have it, you'd see people walking off cliffs, petting poisonous cobras, or jumping into volcanoes. The end goal with fear is to ensure our survival. Because fear can be passed on through genes, throughout the evolution of humans, we have been passed down the correct fears that have helped our ancestors stay alive. Now today, while we aren't exactly needing these instincts to the extent of our ancestors, fear is still crucial to our survival today. The only thing that has really changed is our stimulus. Instead of fearing a lion on the African plains, we fear a car crossing the road. We also have the ability to anticipate, and this can be a good thing but also a very bad thing. For instance, most of us have never fallen off a ride at a theme park, yet we can anticipate what would happen because we've read about it, seen it in movies, and heard stories. Anticipating a fearful experience can be just as traumatic as actually experiencing it. Scared to death. It is very real, and you or I could literally be scared to death. When we are scared, we involuntarily enter the fight or flight response. For this, our body needs extra strength, for which the heart needs to then beat stronger and faster. This is something that is made possible by an injection of calcium into the heart. A problem only arises if a person can't calm down again, and the calcium as well as adrenaline keep pouring in. The fast pumping that was needed just a second ago to either stand and fight or run for the hills now can't stop flooding in. The heart then begins to overpump. If this is not treated, it can lead to a drop in blood pressure, unconsciousness, and ultimately death. Although cardiac patients face a higher risk, completely healthy and totally active people can also die this way. In the event of a bad scare, real or imagined, a person on edge can experience some sensational symptoms. Hyperventilating, freezing in place, or fleeing, just among some. Either way, every reaction originates from a tiny part of our brain. the walnut-sized amygdala. In a study using, you guessed it, mice, they were trained to fear a certain sound by electrical shock. This study revealed two facts about the amygdala. First, whenever a sound was made, they recognized what was about to happen and froze. It was discovered that some neurons inside the amygdala were encoded with memories of fearful experiences, essentially a library that stores previous events that we have learned to be fearful. Secondly, it was found that the amygdala almost completely takes over our brain whenever it recognizes a potential threat. Everything, including the urge to get a pumpkin spice latte, gets pushed aside to focus on a threat. Phobia, an extreme or irrational fear of or aversion to something. It affects 4 out of 5 Americans, according to the National Institute of Mental Health. Reportedly, the most popular of all? Acrophobia, or the fear of heights.